Um, what I've noticed is mostly part A and part B is where you really, part A for both micro and macro is where you can really get your marks. Um, Another question that I wanted to deal with today is ये वाला तो जून 23 का था. Yeah, let's do June 24 वाला आज एक or another one on PPC. So then, sorry, June 24. Let me open that one. All right, let's take a look at this one. All right, take a moment and just read this and then we'll talk about it. Use a production possibility curve diagram to explain how a government in a mixed economy might allocate more resources to consumption and fewer resources to investment. Oh, this one's more complicated. Wait, karo. Let's not go to this one. Sort of we can do, लेकिन ये तुम्हारे normal conventional question से बहुत हट के था. We'll come back to this one. I'll save this one. That's the third one that I wanted to discuss today, actually. Yeah, this is the second one. ये जो last time, Kes, we were talking about increasing and decreasing, increasing and constant wala na. So this is the question where we have to talk about some of the things that we were discussing the other day. So it says an economy contains just two sectors, agriculture sector and industrial. They've already given you the two sectors. So we know what's going on the PPC. With the help of a diagram, explain how a PPC can be used to show the concept of opportunity cost and consider whether opportunity cost is likely to remain constant if resources are reallocated from agriculture sector to the industrial sector. So there is already a direction to the question. We want to break it down into the three parts that we've been doing. क्या था? Your answer should be broken down into the three sections. The first one is assessment objective one, in which we're doing knowledge and understanding for 3 marks. And then you're doing your analysis. Analysis is obviously something which consider two sides of the argument. So alternate देना जरूरी हो जाता है most of the time. And lastly, we have evaluation for 2 marks and your 8 marks is completed. अब इसमें diagram कौन सा वाला बनेगा based on this? Can you suggest what diagram should we make? How should we make? In fact, even if you could like make on a rough and send me a picture and I can like sort of say कि हाँ जी ठीक है कि नहीं ठीक है. Um, can we do that?
Please read it. But also decreasing opportunity cost.
It's an increasing opportunity cost. Okay.
They'll be decreasing.
Okay. Have you sent the picture? Uh,
Uh,
we're more
okay.
interested in what you're doing on the X and the Y axis. Now, that is the more important aspect in this one. So, what they want is आपका agriculture goods versus. That's the must thing. That if you're not doing that, then we have a problem. So you have agriculture goods and you have the industrial goods. Anything else is unacceptable. And then as far as opportunity goes, क्योंकि question के अंदर I don't see anything to do with like increasing or decreasing. Oh, they are talking about is it going to likely to remain constant? Uh, so अब आपकी मर्जी है, honestly, in this one, whether you want to make a straight one or you want to make a curve one. We always prefer this, and there has to be two marks, and the direction of that mark really matters. कि तुम, because they're saying over here कि remains constant if resources are reallocated from agriculture to industrial. So therefore, based on my markings, the reallocation needs to happen in this direction. And that trade-off, the one that I'm going to show, okay, we're going in this direction. That is essential to do in this one. For example, if I was making this agriculture goods and then I'm reducing agriculture goods and industrial ke andar, I will be increasing. So this sort of shows my trade-off. There is a movement along the curve that is taking place. So this will be the diagram you're going to make. You're going to get one mark for correct labels. You're going to get one mark for showing the correct arrow and the movement which is happening from A to B. अगर ये मैं B to A कर देता, that would have shown more agriculture and lesser industrial. Now that's problematic. तो फिर उसका mark कट जाता because the question already has indication of that. ठीक है. Uh, now to get more marks, diagram तो अपनी जगह हो गया. A couple of things that we want to define always when we're doing something like this is, always I would say define these two things. That's number one, you should always define production possibility curve. क्या होता है? Not the model, but the curve that we did last class के अंदर भी, where we said production possibility curve shows various combinations of two goods that an economy can produce by fully utilizing the resources. It's a must thing, whether they give you mark or not. Marking scheme में whether there is mark or not, you never know कल को उसके ऊपर mark can be assigned. ठीक है? The second thing तो हमने last उसमें भी की थी, like they're saying, how PPC can be used to show the concept of opportunity cost. So this becomes very important. Us defining the term opportunity cost. I would even do this. Although the definition is very simple, I think there will be a mark for this. कि opportunity cost क्या होती है? Opportunity cost is the next best alternative for gone. But then we want to show it through the explanation of this diagram. You know how we can say that if we increase the production of industrial goods from IA to IB, then the opportunity cost is giving up production of agriculture goods from AA to AB, and your arrows showing that, that's just great. But this has to be done. अब तुम given up कह लो, forgone कह लो, sacrifice कह लो, honestly they all mean the same thing. तो उसके अंदर कोई मसला नहीं होना चाहिए. But so far we haven't spoken
One
anything. Yeah.
doesn't depend on the economy, how much is sacrifice.
सॉरी, तुम्हारी आवाज बहुत मुश्किल से समझ आ रही है मुझे। कैन यू
Does it depend on the economy how much they will sacrifice?
हाउ मच इज सैक्रिफाइस ऑनेस्टली इसके अंदर? बिकॉज द क्वेश्चन का जो पहला पार्ट है, वेयर द डायग्राम इज नीडेड, they're just simply saying used to show the concept of opportunity cost. So this is plentiful. अगर वो कहते show the concept of increasing opportunity cost, तो that's where I had to show कि ज्यादा sacrifice हो रहा है कि कम sacrifice हो रहा है, तो diagram wise that is what I could have done. The word sacrifice is perfectly acceptable, no problem. Foregone, no problem. Giving up, everything works. All three means the same thing. तो हमें उसमें कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है। लेकिन क्योंकि उसने सिर्फ डायग्राम जस्ट टू शो द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ अपॉर्चुनिटी कॉस्ट, आई थिंक दिस डायग्राम इज परफेक्टली फाइन, कोई मसला नहीं है इसके अंदर। ठीक है। And the later part, and consider whether opportunity cost is likely to remain constant if resources are reallocated. Acha, one more thing. When you're writing this whole part of showing opportunity cost and all, I think what you must also write, although question में तो उन्होंने वैसे ही लिख दिया है कि reallocation हो रही है and all that. I think you should always mention that PPC is showing a movement along the curve. This word, these words, is very important because we've seen in last essay there was actually a mark for it. ये movement, ये मैं movement दिखा रहा हूँ going from point A to point B. In your paragraph form, it's always a good idea to do that. And also in your writing, just to mention that there is a reallocation of resources from agriculture to industrial. Although ये देखो question में लिख दिया है उन्होंने, but if they had not, तो फिर तो इसकी और सिग्निफिकेंस हो जाती है, एग्रीकल्चर टू इंडस्ट्रियल गुड्स, राइट? सो इस तरीके से आप, इट्स ऑलवेज अ वाइज आइडिया टू डू दैट। एंड आई टोल्ड यू कि बहुत स्पेसिफिक नहीं होना, अपने आंसर को थोड़ा सा एक्सपैंड करना जरूरी है। ट्राई टू ब्रिंग इन दीज टर्मिनोलॉजीज व्हेन यू सी एनी। अब जहां तक कांस्टेंट है कि कांस्टेंट नहीं होता, what do you remember about that? When do we have a constant and when do we have an increasing?
And more of the other good.
Yeah, expand.
Could depend whether one is agriculture or industrial.
Yeah, but जो हम इंक्रीसिंग और कांस्टेंट की बात करते हैं, यू स्टिल नॉट क्लैरिफाइंग कि वो इंक्रीसिंग और कांस्टेंट का क्या मतलब है इसमें। What they're saying is whether
As
the opportunity cost increases or whether it remains the same.
it will increase as you produce more agriculture or industrial.
Whether it could be used for agriculture or not. Okay. So, because question के अंदर उन्होंने तुमको पूछा है कि constant रहेगा कि नहीं रहेगा, तो first thing that I would want to explain is कि what do they mean by a constant opportunity cost? So the first thing that we know इस concept के अंदर is that, you know how when we make the PPC curve between, let's say, agriculture and industrial, the constant opportunity cost shows a straight line like this, which means that every time I am increasing the production of this, my opportunity cost, मैं numbers थोड़े से ये लिख रहा हूँ, I'm not writing 1, 2, 3 for a reason. But what we're trying to show over here in the case of a constant is every time you increase the production by 1, you are giving up 2. And when you increase production one more time, for one more unit, you are still giving the same amount. And so what we used to say is that if the resources are equally productive. Okay, if the resources are equally productive, in that case you would have a constant. फिर कोई मसला नहीं है. But the truth or the reality is that the factors of production are not equally productive. ठीक है? They are not equally productive in producing agriculture or industrial goods. And what do we mean by that? Right? And what do we mean by that? So, because we're saying that resources are not equally productive, right? And when I have to move resources from agriculture to industrial, the first thing we do is we always send the worst resource first. You know about that, right? Or do I expand on that idea?
The worst resource.
Sorry.
The worst resource.
Yeah, you tend to send the worst resource. You deploy the worst resource towards the other good. So, for example, taking our example over here, जिसके अंदर हमें agriculture से industrial के ऊपर लोगों को भेजना है. So, imagine our explanation. It's must I write goods, agri good, and this good. Normally, imagine if all our resources are used towards agriculture. Everybody, all my labor is in agriculture. So that's where I have put them. Now, I want to deploy some of the people from agriculture towards industrial. So what happens is, जो मेरा reallocation होता है, तो reallocation के अंदर I never send the best agriculture worker to the industrial zone. I will always send the least productive individual in the agriculture industry. जिसकी वजह से जो हमारा second point बनता है, what that second point shows is that we are able to produce more of industrial, but hardly giving up any agriculture goods, right? We don't want to give a lot of agriculture good because we want to deploy the least suited resource जिसको हम कहते हैं agriculture के अंदर. फिर उसके बाद क्या होता है? Then उसके बाद when we want to send more resources towards industrial good, then we send our second least suitable resource. So we have to give up more because the worst has already been sent. So agri में थोड़ा सा decrease आया है. फिर उसके बाद और बड़ा decrease आएगा. फिर उसके बाद as you're gonna keep on doing, our opportunity cost increases by even more because now important resources are being moved to the industrial. So this sort of connects to the idea कि हमने जो शुरू में बोला that factors of production are not equally productive. So in order to make more industrial goods, first you reallocate the least productive resource towards the industrial good. Therefore, the opportunity cost increases. I think इसका इन लोगों ने marking scheme के अंदर भी they've done a pretty reasonable job with this particular question. So if I show you, like based on what we've done overall and based on what they have suggested, and honestly ये थोड़ी थोड़ी कभी कभार changes आती रहती हैं marking scheme के अंदर, so we want to do something extra every time. The few things जैसे definitions वगैरह हैं. So for this question, consider whether opportunity cost is likely to remain constant. So we explained what constant would have meant and whether based on industrial to agriculture, whether it will remain the same or not. We proved otherwise. Marks कैसे मिलेंगे? Marks बहुत simple है. We're going to look for your diagram. We saw the diagram. I'm going to look at whether your axes are correctly and understanding of PPC shown through accurate diagram. एक mark उसका है. Correctly labeled axes with agriculture and industrial. I'll give you, बिल्कुल examiner इस तरह से mark करेगा. Let me show you. The examiner will see the first and the examiner will say, okay, agriculture, industrial, sahi label hai. Let's give them 1 mark for this. Second, diagram ke andar, if you notice, there is a good trade-off going in the correct definition, direction based on the question ka later part. I'll give you 1 mark for that. Then knowledge and understanding ke andar, definition wise, they want uh, defies or demonstrate clear understanding of the concept of opportunity cost. So opportunity cost is shown and the definition is given, defines. 1 mark मैं उसका दे दूंगा. ठीक है. उसके बाद analysis के अंदर uses the PPC to explain the movement, वो जो पूरा आपका write up होगा, which will explain the diagram saying that uh, from point A to point B, there is a movement along towards the industrial good, और उसके लिए जो है आपको agriculture good sacrifice करना होगा. So 1 mark goes for you just mentioning the idea of that. Or opportunity cost involved hai, because once you're increasing something, you're giving up on the other, and there is a resource reallocation taking place. Just these words, we just want to, just see these words in the paragraph, in the direction of the diagram and how it's moving. फिर उसके बाद जो evaluation वाला part है, evaluation के अंदर they're saying those resources least suited to agriculture will be deployed first. So there will be a low opportunity cost. So opportunity cost will always rise as the resources are increasingly reallocated from. Basically, this is what this diagram के through जो मैंने बात समझाई थी ना, that शुरू के अंदर you're sending the least important, so you're going to give up low. And as you're sending more towards industrial, your opportunity cost is rising. If you just make the diagram, or even if you explain this whole thing without a diagram, this is perfectly fine. But as long as you're saying कि शुरू के अंदर opportunity cost, because reality के अंदर, I think the thing which they have missed out, which I feel should have been there, is you mentioning this part. That because in reality, agriculture and industrial goods, your resources are not equally mobile or equally productive. तो उसकी वजह से the workers in the agriculture cannot be exactly same productive in industrial, right? So उस बात को I think emphasize करना जरूरी था. अब ये जो मार्किंग स्कीम है, ये तो सैंपल की है. दिस इज टू लॉन्ग. बिफोर 2025 के हिसाब से मेरी नजर में तो जो इन्होंने एनालिसिस करना चाहिए था, वो इस चीज का करना चाहिए था, द कंसिडर वाला पार्ट. दिस शुड हैव बीन योर 3 marks फॉर एनालिसिस बेस्ड ऑन द रीसेंट केस स्टडी का स्टाइल, विच इज यू टॉकिंग अबाउट के पूरा constant opportunity cost, under what circumstances it could be, and increasing under what circumstances it could be, and then final your evaluation as to के reality के अंदर जो है, because resources are not इक्वली प्रोडक्टिव, तो कांस्टेंट नहीं रहेगा और इंक्रीजिंग होना चाहिए. बिकॉज आई हैव अ फीलिंग कि ये एनालिसिस के अंदर, नई मार्किंग स्कीम के अंदर, दे वुड हैव एक्चुअली कंसिडर को डिस्कस करते ऑन बोथ साइड्स के अंदर व्हाट सर्कमस्टांसेस इट कुड बी कांस्टेंट and under what circumstances it would be increasing. And resource key efficiency would be the tying part. I think the third essay that I want to deal with today actually might discuss one of that information. Are we good so far?
discuss what the economy is based on, agro or industrial.
uh, वापस से बताओ प्लीज मुझे. I think the internet's not working correctly.
Would you have to discuss what the economy is based on? Like if it's an agriculture-based economy or industrial-based economy.
Yeah, वो evaluation के अंदर you definitely you could that would be actually an evaluative point. If you have analysis के अंदर talked about the constant and the increasing, तो फिर evaluation के अंदर those sort of discussions would be valid to do. Okay, it depends on whether the economy is more on the industrial side or even the fact कि the resources mobility is there or not. Because कुछ economies जो agriculture based उसको industrial के अंदर move करना भी आसान नहीं हो सकता. There are obviously inherent problems in you moving the resources because sometimes all resources cannot be moved. They're not mobile for industrial goods. तो ये तुम्हारी फिर evaluative discussions होनी चाहिए फिर उस instance के अंदर. Again, based on the new marking scheme style. So we're still open to that discussion. हो सकता है कि same question, I have no doubt, same question in 2023 versus same question in 2026 will not have exactly the same marking scheme. That is for sure. Uh, तो कंसिस्टेंसी थोड़ी सी लैक करती है. तो फिर व्हाट वी वांट टू डू इज वी वांट टू मेक श्योर कि जब हम अपना आंसर लिख रहे हैं तो वी वांट टू थ्रो एज मेनी डार्ट्स एंड वी वांट टू डिस्कस एज मच स्टफ एज वी कैन सो दैट जब मार्किंग स्कीम बने तो वी ट्राई टू गेट द मैक्सिमम मार्क्स आउट ऑफ इट. लेकिन जो मिनिमम रिक्वायरमेंट्स है दैट नीड्स टू बी डन. सही है. सो दैट वुड हैव बीन अ वेरी गुड इवैल्यूएटिव पॉइंट इन माय ओपिनियन. ठीक है. Okay. Now, this was one of the questions which really people messed up in because this was slightly out of the regular questions that they were sending. ये 2024 का है, by the way. तो ये this one is relatively more recent to the ones that we've done before. So, if you read the question, इसके अंदर you've done the economic system.
Yes,
Okay, great. How come you've done it so quickly?
each was.
You are doing AS right now, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, you guys are going very fast then. Okay. Use the production possibility curve diagram to explain how a government in a mixed economy might allocate more resources to consumer consumption and fewer resources to investment, and consider a limitation of this approach to resource allocation. So we have to do a diagram. I think diagram के अंदर the two goods. What do you think the two goods will be that we'll talk about?
Maybe anything. It's capital and consumer. It's because it's investment and consumption.
Exactly. So capital के लिए हम and fewer resources to investment. So let me take capital good over here and capital good पूरा लिखना जरूरी है and consumer good over here. All right, we'll make an increasing opportunity cost curve. Anything else in the diagram that any specific direction? We want to move, or at least what we want to show is that we're going from point A to point B. We're going away from consumer goods and we're going towards the capital goods because they're saying more consumption, so consumer good, and fewer resources in investment, so capital good. Um, Accompanied by an explanation. You remember I've said before also, जब भी आप ये करेंगे, a few things that you must put in: the definition of PPC, the definition of opportunity cost, the idea of movement along the curve due to reallocation of resources. So whenever we're dealing with reallocation of resources, so these two, yeah, I should see these three things and obviously the explanation of the diagram, whether there is mark for it or not, that what is happening, what this diagram is showing is that fewer consumption means that consumer goods should fall and more of and fewer investment. Wait, have I done something wrong? I think so. I've done something wrong. It's wrong. It's wrong. It's wrong. It's wrong. It moves in the other direction. Fewer capital there. Do you follow? Supposed to go in this direction. Fewer capital and more consumer goods, और इसका आप explanation कर सकते हो. And then the problem, what happened was that kids missed out on, or they misread how a government in a mixed economy might allocate more resources. The question is more about how the government can encourage more consumption and towards consumer goods and less इन्वेस्टमेंट टुवर्ड्स कैपिटल तो वो कौन सी गवर्नमेंट पॉलिसीज हो सकती हैं थ्रू विच दे कैन एक्चुअली डू दैट सो किड्स एक्चुअली लॉस्ट लाइक ऑलमोस्ट थ्री मार्क्स ओवर हियर बिकॉज दे कंप्लीटली दे थॉट कि ये तो यही करना है डेफिनेशंस देनी है एलोकेशन शो करनी है एंड ऑल ऑफ दैट बट उसके तो सिर्फ ऊपर वाले मार्क्स जो थे उन्होंने डायग्राम के जो मार्क्स दिए वो कुछ इस तरीके से इन दिस वन एक तो नंबर वन योर लेबल्स you got it correctly, then one is for this one, and one is for these entire explanation about the movement. ये knowledge and understanding में दिया है इस बारे में. और फिर उसके बाद हाउ को उन्होंने फिर कहा कि हाउ कैन द गवर्नमेंट encourage people to consume more consumer goods. तो फिर गवर्नमेंट कैसे encourage कर सकती है. So then you had to suggest some ways how you can that the government could have increased the subsidy towards this good, which could have reduced their prices and increased the quantity demanded. That could have been one of the ways through which consumer good के अंदर spending हो सकती थी. और direct taxes का कम कर देना. If they reduce direct taxes, what happens? People's disposable income goes up, and so they are able to consume more consumption goods. One of the ways we could all, by the way, you're just getting 1 mark each, na? हर reason का 1 mark मिलेगा. So now they compared to O levels, now the marks are not coming easy, so you have to give maximum information to get one mark. Usme se bhi, if you leave out, like for example, if you say if you increase the subsidy, that will cause the demand to rise, but you don't connect it with the falling prices. So there's a problem. In fact, if you say the subsidies will increase, that will cause the prices to fall down, and you assume कि ये तो understood है कि जब prices गिर जाएंगी तो based on the question we're talking about more consumption of the good and you don't connect it with, so therefore the demand for goods will rise, demand for consumer goods will rise. If you don't finish that, we're going to write next to your answer TV and we will not give you the mark, which means too vague, it's not connecting the whole chain. So now connecting the whole chain is an important thing to do. Same goes with direct taxes. I guess it is important to mention that direct taxes is sort of like an income tax. So if you reduce income tax, then people will have more disposable income. And with that disposable income, people will buy more consumer goods. पूरा पूरा connect करना अब must हो गया है. Otherwise, the point will not be considered, even though the point you're writing is correct or the factor you're discussing is correct. ठीक है. um,
Paragraph. Will you get the mark if you make the target?
यार ये माइक इस बिल्कुल मुझे आवाज समझ नहीं आ रही.
So they
Can you
make the
write on?
diagram first.
Yeah, डायग्राम इसके अंदर the funny thing is देर इज ये वाली जो बात ये लिखी है ना, तो डायग्राम का मार्क तो मिल जाएगा ना व्हेन यू गोइंग टू एक्सप्लेन. ये वन मार्क जो है दैट इज यूजिंग द डायग्राम्स इंफॉर्मेशन हियर. तो उसका मार्क तुमको मिल गया. अगर ये तुम उल्टा कर देते तो वी वुड नॉट हैव गिवन यू दिस मार्क because you're not answering this part of the question, and उसकी explanation की भी mark चले जाते. तो basically we are using the diagram in a way, but not for the analysis as such. वो हम how a government मतलब हो गया कि गवर्नमेंट की पॉलिसी, असल में इस क्वेश्चन में गवर्नमेंट की पॉलिसी नीड्स टू बी डिस्कस्ड, दैट हाउ द गवर्नमेंट कैन encourage and discourage investment also. So we know that government investments को भी discourage कर सकती है by reducing incentives, reducing in businesses के लिए reducing investment incentives, जिसके अंदर लोन लेना मुश्किल कर दिया या बिजनेस इंपोर्टेड मशीन लाने में थोड़ी सी प्रॉब्लम क्रिएट कर दी. So sort of like that we're talking about, and how then eventually that will reduce investments, because if government is not helping businesses, so businesses will not be interested in expanding their operations, and so that can also, but it has to be, because sometimes in a lot of answers what I read was कि बच्चे रिसेशन के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं कि अगर इकोनॉमी में रिसेशन होगा तो बिजनेसेस विल नॉट इन्वेस्ट, तो उससे भी जो है रिडक्शन हो जाएगी. बट रिमेंबर रिसेशन इज, वी आर नॉट सेइंग कि रिसेशन हैज बीन क्रिएटेड बाय द गवर्नमेंट और गवर्नमेंट विल बी interested in creating a recession. So that's a very bad idea. And again, the point is not explaining that government is responsible, or government is encouraging or discouraging a certain behavior. And plus recession में consumption भी गिर जाती है. So then I don't know why kids were writing that. तो इसकी वजह से then you don't want to do that. Uh, okay, so let me just read. Uh, Diagram, and will you mention how you don't need to do the diagrams? No need for demand and supply increasing diagrams. The quite no need. We'll just write over there irrelevant, or question mark. In fact, we'll put a question mark. ये क्यों किया है? And will you mention how the firms using it, like using subsidies for advertising? Using subsidy for advertising. Uh, Subsidy is not given for advertisement purposes. Subsidy is given purely for production reasons, supply बढ़ाने के लिए. तो उसका उससे नहीं है कोई इंटरेस्ट, बिकॉज सब्सिडी आपको कभी भी नहीं मिलेगी कि आप एडवर्टाइज कर रहे हो उससे, राइट. सब्सिडी इज कि आप उस पैसे से या तो रॉ मटेरियल खरीद लें, तो वी आर सॉर्ट ऑफ लाइक पेइंग, हेल्पिंग यू पे अ लिटिल फॉर योर फैक्टर्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन. तो उससे सप्लाई इंक्रीज होता है एंड द प्राइसेस फॉल डाउन एंड क्वांटिटी. सो यू, वैसे सब्सिडी का जहां तक पॉइंट है ना, if you increase the subsidy, I think it is important कि आप advertisement की जगह subsidy को हमेशा, I don't know why I did not do that, but I should have done that. You always connect it to the cost of production going down, leading to supply increase, and then that causes the price to go down. That's the chain reaction. And we should do the chain reaction. It's a very wise idea to always subsidy को cost of production से connect करके फिर price reduction पे connect करो उसको. So always do that. In fact, whether there is a mark for it or not a mark for it, but that's the chain you will do. Never for advertisement purposes. Never seen it anywhere, them talking about that. So सही है. एंड देन जब हमारा क्वेश्चन, लेट मी गो बैक टू द क्वेश्चन का जो फिर लेटर पोर्शन है, इट सेज एंड कंसिडर अ लिमिटेशन ऑफ दिस अप्रोच टू रिसोर्स एलोकेशन. मतलब काउंटर करो कि व्हेन द गवर्नमेंट इज डूइंग दीज पॉलिसीज, विल दीज पॉलिसीज वर्क और नॉट. ठीक है, तो ये अब हमने डिस्कस करना है. So remember, it's the same standardized answer for this one. All you have to do is context to context आपने इसको vary कर. Which is, and we did this in the first परसों जो हमने किया था question उसके अंदर, that when you're moving from capital to consumer, ये जो reallocation है, this reallocation is, it doesn't just happen so easily. Sometimes the businesses are reluctant for this because they're not ready. Because remember, there's not always factor mobility from capital to consumer. It always takes time, sometimes years, for a, an economy to move from a certain type of good. For example, अगर हम वही जो एक मैंने तो हेनरी फोर्ड वाली एग्जांपल दी थी, दैट इज मिलिट्री गुड्स वर्सेस कंज्यूमर गुड्स का जो मूवमेंट था, दैट कांट जस्ट हैपन सो इजीली ओवरनाइट, इट टेक्स टाइम. तो अगर हम इंडस्ट्रियल गुड्स हम कहते हैं, देखें पाकिस्तान में पॉपुलेशन अच्छी खासी है, फिफ्थ सिक्स लार्जेस्ट पॉपुलेशन इन द वर्ल्ड, सो यू हैव अ लॉट ऑफ माउथ टू फीड एंड फूड इज स्कैर्स. बट ऑन द अदर हैंड, इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ के लिए मशीन्स आर इम्पोर्टेंट, कैपिटल गुड्स आर रियली इम्पोर्टेंट. अब कंज्यूमर गुड्स से अगर आपको कैपिटल गुड्स, सॉरी कैपिटल से आपने अगर कंज्यूमर पे मूव करना है, दैट वी फील दैट फीडिंग पीपल इज आवर प्रायोरिटी, राइट. सो हम इंडस्ट्रियल गुड्स से मूव करके कंज्यूमर गुड्स में हमने लेके जाना है. तो दैट ट्रांजिशन कैन नॉट हैपन क्विकली बिकॉज ऑल फैक्टर्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन कैन नॉट बी इजीली मूव. इसको आप फैक्टर ऑफ प्रोडक्शन मोबिलिटी कहते हैं, right? So the same idea that there is a time lag, it's not going to happen instantly. That can be one of your limitation for this. Businesses might not be able to do that very quickly. They might need time in order to do that. तो वो हो सकता है. Sometimes even like response of consumer. Uh, Let me bring something from A2 over here. You know how we say that any point on the PPC is productively efficient points, right? What point A and B is showing is that you're using all your resources and your cost is probably minimizing. ठीक है? But point A बनाना चाहिए कि point B बनाना चाहिए, PPC will not tell you what you should make. Okay, that's not PPC's job. PPC's job is to tell you what are the options available, and then demand and supply in the economy will tell us कि A बनेगा कि B बनेगा. यहाँ पे government is getting involved and trying to push कि industry moves away from capital towards consumer. It's quite possible that the demand and the supply is not doing that. So obviously now the government is going against the price mechanism, and that can create its own market failures. That's our evaluative discussion that we're doing over here. So उसके लिए I think that context was important कि PPC doesn't tell you कि what should be made. Okay, that's demand and supply's domain कि बनाना क्या चाहिए हमको. So yeah, so that would be our final evaluative statement over here with a final conclusion that the government can influence using various policies as mentioned above in the analysis. But these, uh, policies always have limitations based on the consumers and the producers' reaction and the timeline. So sort of like concluding, पूरा एक, so your answer is has basically the knowledge and understanding with the diagram. It has the analysis, which is usually two-side argument, but this case के अंदर it's more on the how the government can do something, and limitation is how the government um, might have friction or reaction from the market. So again, the question could have like a different marking scheme also. लेकिन अभी तक जो है उसमें as long as you're answering all aspects of it, I think शुरू के अंदर they've been trying to, अभी मेरे पास कोई latest PPC के ऊपर अभी तक नहीं आया है 2025 में इस 2025 में आई डोंट थिंक पीपीसी का किसी भी वेरिएंट में क्वेश्चन आया है मे बी अगर अक्टूबर वगैरह में आ जाएगा तो देन आई pick that out and we'll make a comparison कि वो सही है कि नहीं सही है ठीक है so that sort of concludes our three types. I think I can think of a old question or something. Increasing and constant here, but let me just see because I don't know why or where I remember seeing one of the PPC question, in fact, increasing or constant का. Okay, so there is one question. एक second. Yeah, let's quickly look at one more question. PPC, I think this is, I don't think it's still lava for your question. This one is from November 21. November 24. With the help of a diagram, explain the significance of a position within a market economy's PPC and consider whether such a position is likely to be permanent. Um, Again, some of the things are standardized, so we don't even need to worry about कि हम उसके बारे में हमने क्या करना है. Explain the significance of a position within a market. What does that mean within? What are we talking about within के अंदर? Okay, so last question में you're asking अगर limitation के अंदर there's only one limitation? No, there are three. एक limitation is how the consumers will react, or whether they will be जब गवर्नमेंट इन्फोर्स कर रही है मोर कंज्यूमर गुड्स की तरफ तो क्या कंज्यूमर्स will actually go for it, how when we said the government is giving subsidies ताकि prices गिरे so will the consumers go towards when the prices falls down? Now there's a question mark there. We know there will be a slight increase, but how big of an increase? How much they will move towards it. So there's a question mark over there, how they behave. तो एक कंज्यूमर का रिएक्शन है एक प्रोड्यूसर्स का रिएक्शन है that how easily are they move their resources from consumer from capital to consumer because a lot of times अगर जब हम पाकिस्तान में देखते हैं so even though the government is making the lives hell for business owners, but businesses, at the end of the day, there's too much at stake and they just bear with it and they continue to do what they're doing. So, दूसरा consumer, एक producer का behavior and एक तो time lag का issue that when the government will make these policies, how long it will take for those uh, im- effects to have an impact. So actually, there are three limitations over here. I feel any two with a conclusion is more than enough. तीसरा जरूरी भी नहीं है आपको देने का. दो इज गुड इनफ. If capital goods increases productivity, so do you mention long run limitation? Uh, the thing is it connecting to the question which is about the government is doing something, government is trying to do something, and that's not happening. That's the key limitation. The government is attempting to do something and that's not working the way the government is intending to do. So that is what the limitation is about. If you're thinking if capital goods, I don't know how you're connecting this. If capital goods to actually give hai, because consumer ka direction, government ka direction is more towards consumer and less towards capital. In fact, इसमें तो ज्यादा हमें ये नजर आता है कि जब गवर्नमेंट ये मूव करेगी तो लॉन्ग रन के अंदर पीपीसी कर्व माइट शिफ्ट इनवर्ड्स एंड दैट विल रिड्यूस बोथ द कंज्यूमर एंड द कैपिटल गुड्स. मुझे वो ज्यादा अच्छी लिमिटेशन नजर आ रही. From short run, long run. Evaluation में we like short run, long run का discussion by the way. Capital goods increases productivity. So do you mention long run limitations since capital goods are not produced as much? You can do that. You can do that. But as long as तुम आखिर में जाके जब तक तुम connection ये नहीं बनाते हो that in the long run consumer goods will also fall, तो उस वक्त तक ये पॉइंट की वैलिडिटी आती नहीं है. द पॉइंट विल बिकम वैलिड व्हेन, क्योंकि देखो क्वेश्चन इज गवर्नमेंट वांट्स टू make more consumption of goods and less towards capital. अब जब कैपिटल कम हुआ so in your evaluation, if I'm repeating now, अगर कैपिटल गुड्स के अंदर इन्वेस्टमेंट कम हुई है तो लॉन्ग रन के अंदर जब पीपीसी इनवर्ट शिफ्ट होगा तो कंज्यूमर गुड की भी प्रोडक्शन कम हो जाएगी इन द लॉन्ग रन. दैट्स एब्सोल्युटली फाइन. दैट विल बी वैलिड. द ओनली प्रॉब्लम व्हाट आई फील इस पॉइंट के अंदर ये है, अगर तुम्हारा एग्जामिनर अच्छा है और उसको इकोनॉमिक्स अच्छी आती है तो वो इस इवेल्युएटिव पॉइंट को फैक्टर इन कर लेगा और समझ जाएगा और तुमको मार्क दे देगा. लेकिन इफ योर एग्जामिनर इज वीक in that way, that examiner is going to limit him or herself to the time lag, response of business and consumer, and might not discuss ye etc. इसीलिए है कि there can be other responses also. So when a kid gives that response, make sure कि उस response को आप tally करो with the main essence of the question, right? Which is that when government is trying to do something and that something might not work effectively, although your point is perfectly fine up until तुम consumption के साथ उसको connection अगर दे दो तो long run के अंदर definitely it's not going to work in your favor. तो बस सही है, फिर done है. There is no problem in that. It can be discussed. वैसे तो मैं तुमको सच में बता रहा हूँ, evaluation के अंदर ना एग्जामिनर दूसरा मार्क बहुत ही रेयर सर्कमस्टांसेस में देता है. यहाँ पे ना, for that you just have to have exceptional two very good evaluative points, like nice and heavy, lots of lines, and very to the question का answer को, तो फिर examiner दे देगा. Honestly, I've rarely, if I check 250 papers, out of 250 papers, I don't remember. Maximum, I would say कि अगर मैंने किसी को 8 out of 8 दिया हूँ ना, तो 250 papers में से 5 people might have gotten 8 out of 8. और इवैल्यूएशन के अंदर यूजली हार्डली आई गिवन एनीवन टू because kids are unable to go to that extent of the evaluation. I don't know why kids are still treating evaluation like a conclusion. Evaluation is not a conclusion. Evaluation is culmination of what you've done in the analysis. It's an extended part of an analysis. In fact, आगे जाके जब हम बहुत सारे केस एसेस करेंगे ना, you will notice कि मैं इवैल्यूएशन एनालिसिस में से ही उठा रहा हूँ कि जो ऊपर एनालिसिस में बच्चे ने जो पॉइंट्स डिस्कस किए हैं, इफ दोस पॉइंट्स आर नॉट गोइंग इन इवैल्यूएशन और उसकी उसको यूज करते हुए इवैल्यूएशन को एक्सप्लेन नहीं हो रहा होगा, तो इवैल्यूएशन के मार्क्स थोड़े से नहीं दिए जा रहे होंगे। राइट, अब ये सब चीजें कब पता लगती है? ये तभी पता लगती है जब एग्जामिनर ने मार्किंग स्कीम बनाई। तो ये बहुत वेरिएशन है इसके अंदर। व्हाट वी वांट टू डू इज, द पॉइंट ऑफ दिस प्रैक्टिस इज दैट वी लर्न टू अंडरस्टैंड द क्वेश्चन एंड द क्वेश्चन मेन एसेंस, और उस एसेंस के ऊपर तुम मुझे जो भी इवैल्यूएटिव स्टेटमेंट दोगे, आई विल एक्सेप्ट। बट थोड़ा सा उसको हट के तुमने कोई जनरल इवैल्यूएशन देने की कोशिश की, तो फिर मार्क नहीं मिलेगा। इवैल्यूएशन हैज टू बी बेस्ड ऑन द क्वेश्चन स्मॉल रिक्वायरमेंट। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, इसके अंदर जो इवैल्यूएशन है, आई कैन टेल राइट नाउ कि इवैल्यूएशन में कौन सा मेन चीज, जब मैं इवैल्यूएशन पढ़ूंगा तो आई वांट टू सी इफ योर इवैल्यूएशन इज फाइनली डिस्कसिंग कि जो पोजीशन है वो परमानेंट है कि ट्रांजिशनल है। एनी इवैल्यूएशन हैज टू बी आंसरिंग दैट पर्टिकुलर थिंग। तो इसके पीछे जो एनालिसिस होना चाहिए, दैट एनालिसिस शुड बी द रीजंस और मे बी व्हाई द पोजीशंस डू चेंज, व्हाई द पोजीशंस डोंट चेंज। तो असल में वो होना चाहिए। बट अगेन, वी डोंट नो, लेट्स सी व्हाट द मार्किंग स्कीम सेज इसके अंदर। बट हाउ वुड आई आंसर दिस क्वेश्चन विदाउट इवन लुकिंग एट द मार्किंग स्कीम फॉर इट? With the help of a diagram, explain the significance of a position within the market economy's PPC. तो स्टैंडर्ड चीजें हैं, पीपीसी को डिफाइन कर लो, whether there is mark for it or not. Point inside की बात हो रही है, goods are not mentioned, you can do whatever goods you want. We've always talked about capital and consumer, you can stick with that, capital good। एग्रीकल्चर और मैन्युफैक्चर्ड भी जो है ना, वो भी एक अच्छे वो है। गुड एक्स गुड वाई भी एक्सेप्टेबल है बाय। ठीक है, गुड ए गुड बी गुड एक्स गुड वाई, देर ऑल एक्सेप्टेबल। यू डूइंग अ पीपीसी कर्व लाइक दिस, नॉर्मली ज्यादातर आपने इस तरह से बनाना है। एवरी टाइम यू हैव टू मेक श्योर you're touching the axes, and then within a curve का मतलब है we're talking about a point inside the curve। Let me mark it as point A। और उसके बाद वी शुड डिफाइन पीपीसी। इस क्वेश्चन में कोई मूवमेंट वाली बात तो नहीं हो रही, सो आई डोंट नीड टू गो ओवर द मूवमेंट अलोंग द कर्व एंड द अपॉर्चुनिटी कॉस्ट का डिस्कशन। But I would like to discuss what this point inside means, that we know that this combination is producible, but we know that our factors of production are not being utilized fully. There is spare capacity, idle capacity available, and there is an inefficient allocation of resources. We want to throw all these heavy, heavy ideas, although they all mean the same thing, by the way, but we would want to talk about that। अगर डायग्राम को यूज करके ये पॉइंट को एक्सप्लेन करना है, विच यूजुअली आई टेल माय किड्स कि प्लीज डू दैट, which is this: if we are producing at point A, that means we're producing KA and CA, right? That's what this point A represents। What I usually tell them is कि इसकी एक mathematical explanation using graph could be that if the economy is producing KA, then the PPC shows that the economy can actually produce CB. Okay? But since they are producing only at CA, there has to be spare capacity available, right? That's a mathematical proof for it. But usually we don't do that. It's not wrong. And it just clearly explains कि ये जो हम unemployment or inefficiency की बात कर रहे हैं, what do we really mean and how PPC is being used to explain the idea. You understand what I'm trying to explain here? Normally, you will never see this sort of an explanation in essay, nor would you see it in their in their requirement. But I have a habit of थोड़ा सा go one extra step and explain that. फिर उसके बाद the idea consider whether such a position is likely to be permanent. मतलब will you always be at point A? So have you ever done actual and potential GDP or actual growth and potential growth wali baat? Um, so basically what we usually say is that any point on the curve shows your potential. Na? In another word, it shows your productive capacity. Now, whether the economy is producing at the productive capacity or not, there's a question mark there. Kyunki if your economy is here and your potential is out there, what it means is, you know how at PTM teachers and parents discuss that, oh, the kid has potential, but actually they're just doing nalaiki and not studying enough and they're below potential. That's what it means. With the given resources, you can produce up until here, but you're choosing not to do that. That means there is idle capacity. Is this a permanent situation? No, of course not. If an economy utilizes its resources more, then an economy will move towards the potential. And if it reaches full employment of resources, right? If it achieves full employment of resources, it will move on to the PPC. It will no longer be inside PPC. है ना? So that is one of the discussions we can do. So in conclusion, what we're saying is कि ये position permanent नहीं है. It's a very transitional thing. In fact, I would love to even talk about over here. That would be a fantastic evaluative point if one can do that. Every economy, capital, consumer, and let's say like this, imagine if an economy is here at potential. We have to connect to the y and the x axis. It's a must. Imagine the economy is at potential. So is it likely to remain over there? जैसे मैंने ऊपर वाले पार्ट में कहा कि when we were inside, it's not permanent because if the economy के अंदर, if the economy grows, you know, if the economy comes out of recession, तो क्या होगा? When economy comes out of recession, the demand for goods and services will rise, the resource use will start to increase, and chances are that the economy might reach potential. All right, fantastic. फिर क्या वो potential पे रुक जाएगी? Well, there is a good chance that if you've invested in capital goods enough, the PPC might actually jump out and your original PPC curve might not exist anymore, right? The original, it does not exist anymore, and the economy may, your potential has increased, and you've gone back inside now. So now it's sort of like saying कि ये तो और permanent हो सकता है because every time the economy reaches potential and investment can happen and economic growth can happen and you'll end up back inside and then you'll try to pursue the same thing all over again. Okay. Uh, if we want to discuss, so can it go further inside? Of course, it can go further inside. देखो जब recession depression बन जाएगा, imagine this is already showing that economy के अंदर idle resources हैं, and maybe if the economy there's a COVID or something like that happen and economy goes into further recession, you can even fall further in. But the question, मुझे जो problem है, the significance of the position within a market economies and consider is it likely to be permanent? तो मैं इसको as a wholesome देख रहा हूँ कि inside versus on the curve का discussion मैं ज्यादा देख रहा हूँ. But I think significant, explain the significance of the position. Definitely, definitely inside के अंदर भी if you talk about that if there is a point A that shows unemployment. And if you go further in, that might show even a higher unemployment, and a point on the right will show higher employment, right? Unemployment falling. So I think that might explain the significance of the position. But I feel in the marking scheme, probably they might not have discussed the more in and the more out, but rather they would have just taken a point inside की significance क्या है. So the whole idea of unemployment and inefficiency and spare capacity, I think that is what they'll take into consideration. But एक दफा देख लेते हैं marking scheme. Let's confirm it. This is question 3B. 3A, sorry. Okay, so what are they giving you the mark for? बहुत easy marks हैं. दो गुड्स सही तरीके से कोई भी दो गुड्स ए बी एक्स वाई जी वट एवर एज लॉन्ग एज इट सेज गुड ए गुड बी गुड इनफ 1 mark for that. Touching the axes के mark दे रहे हैं. Just imagine sometimes in A levels they become so difficult to get marks and sometimes they're just throwing it there. And a position within a PPC clearly shown with a point with a label on it. 3 marks easy. An analysis on the significance of the position inside a PPC. Inefficiency का word use हो रहा है. I'll give you a mark if you use the word inefficiency. All resources are not being utilized. Unemployment, I'll give you a mark. Where the output of product of both product is lower than it would be if all resources. Okay, so वो जो मैंने diagram वाला point बताया था, so I think that sort of like deals with this particular point कि outside वाले के अंदर अच्छा अगर मैं graphically भी दिखाऊं तो it would be this that you know how this point you have more of both as compared to this point. So that's what they're saying. या फिर even this explanation is completely valid for that. उसके अलावा there should be some reference to the permanency वाला idea और evaluation के अंदर वो क्या बता रहे हैं offer a valid judgment on whether a position is likely to remain to be permanent. So this is the conclusion. I think we spoke at much detail. वैसे तो मेरे ख्याल में it's never permanent, a point in sight. बट इवन इफ यू से कि अगर ये एक ऐसी इकोनॉमी है जो पता नहीं जिम्बाब्वे है राइट सो जिम्बाब्वे फॉर द लॉन्गेस्ट टाइम देयर इज मैसिव अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट हैज ऑलवेज बीन देयर पॉलिटिकल टर्मोइल हमेशा से है तो उनके केस में इट माइट सीम कि वो तो एक परमानेंटली एक अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट की सिचुएशन में है because of poor governance and all that they're unable to achieve economic growth and reach potential because they have 95% unemployment for the longest time. 100 में से 5 लोग काम कर रहे हैं सिर्फ. So, you know, evaluation के अंदर as long as तुम permanency के point of view को लेके you're doing whatever discussion, uh, you can get all sorts of marks for it. कोई मसला ही नहीं है. ठीक है? So that's how that's done. Okay. I need to stop here. I need to go to the dentist. It'll take me 10 minutes. Um, but what I'll do is I'll send these questions. So please make an attempt. Please let me see how you write. ठीक है। बाय बाय।